Hey guys, Jay here, and in this video I am going to be swapping out the fan in my power supply. Now you might be saying, Jay, why on earth would you want to do that? Well, there could be a few reasons. Most importantly, because I can. Second reason being, maybe your power supply has a cheap fan in it that makes a lot of noise, or maybe your power supply has a fan in it that's kind of at the end of its life and it's making a lot of noise. So, you can quiet it down a little bit by swapping it out. So for this video, I will be using my EVGA Supernova NEX650G, which is a 650 watt 80 plus gold rated power supply, and I will be replacing the fan with a Noctua NF-A14 FLX. Now the reason I chose the FLX is mainly because it moves a lot of air, and it comes with two low noise adapters, a low noise and an ultra low noise, so it can run at its standard 1200 RPM, or with the low noise 1050, or with the ultra low noise all the way down to 900 RPM, which gives some pretty silent operation. So before I even started, I went ahead and took some measurements with my Samsung Go mic, and I know it's kind of a cheap mic, but it should be good enough to give us a rough idea of what's happening. Plus, I do have ears, so I can kind of report as to the differences that I'm hearing as well. So what I did was, with my computer running, power supply still inside of it, I took measurements with my mic sitting at about head level so that I get a rough idea of the noise level from what I would be hearing with all the fans running in my computer. Then, as the next best thing that I have to an anechoic chamber is my closet, because it's full of clothes and I can close the door and turn off the light and it actually gets pretty quiet in there. Then I took the power supply and I put it inside my closet with the Go mic, and I took two measurements, one from about 3 inches, so with the Go mic kind of right up next to the power supply, and then the other one from about 3 feet. And I also took one measurement of just silence inside the closet, so that we kind of have a base reading to judge the other two off of. I did all of my measurements with my Go mic plugged into my MacBook Air, with the mic set into the omnidirectional mode, and the input volume set all the way up to 100%. So we got maximum sensitivity. I don't necessarily know if that was the best way, but I can say I got some results, and it worked. So now I'm going to go over a quick rundown of how you can swap out the power supply and the trials and tribulations that I faced when figuring out how to do so, and then we'll come back and give you some results. After removing the power supply from your computer, the first thing you'll need to do is remove all of the screws from the top of the power supply, including the ones holding the fan. Next, remove the grill covering the fan and gently pry at the edges of the top of the case until you can remove the top from the body of the power supply. Then, with the fan out of the way, clip the zip ties holding the wires together, separating the wires of the fan from the rest, and pull loose the fan connector from the header on the power supply. For this next part, while I would like to say to remove the connectors from each fan by pulling up on the little retaining tabs while pulling the wires loose, then fitting the Noctua wires into the 2-lead connector and attaching it to the power supply's header, this is where I ran into one small complication. The power supply's fan header doesn't provide enough power to actually push the Noctua fan. So, I would have to feed the Noctua fan's wires through the case and connect it to the power supply using a provided Molex adapter. This wasn't all bad, however, as it meant that I would be able to control the fan's speed using the low noise adapter the NF-A14 came with. Because the original power supply fan is a 135mm fan, and we're going to be replacing it with a 140mm Noctua NF-A14, the screw holes on the power supply and the power supply fan are a little bit closer together than they are on our 140mm Noctua fan. However, that's not a problem. With the help of a Dremel, I was able to widen the holes to the necessary positions. After a quick test fit, a couple of the holes were a little too big to hold the screws in, so I solved this by filling in the gaps with some hot glue while using the screws themselves as space holders. Then after the hot glue dried, I just unscrewed the screws and had the proper sized holes. Now we can reinstall the little rubber dampers back into the corners of the fan and attach it to the top of the power supply. Finally, I replaced the sleeving material over the fan wires and soldered the wires from the connector back to their correspondingly colored wire from the fan, using small pieces of heat shrink to cover the exposed solder joins and covering it all with one more large piece of heat shrink to tie it all together. Now that that's all done, we can replace the top of the power supply by sliding it back down on top of the main body of the power supply, making sure that the sides are fitted together correctly. Now all that's left to do is replace the screws into the top of the power supply, put it back into the computer, and give it a test run. Now, before we get into the results, I do just want to note that the measurements are in decibels below full scale, which means that the higher the number, the quieter it actually is. So for our first measurement, where the microphone was set at head level while my PC was running, the ambient room sound without anything running was 59.5 decibels below full scale. With the stock fan in the power supply, it was 53.8 decibels below full scale, and with the Noctua fan swapped in, it was 55.2 decibels below full scale, with a difference of 1.4 decibels. The next two sets of measurements were taken inside my anechoic chamber with just the power supply, where the ambient sound was 60.4 decibels below full scale, so a little bit quieter than the room that I had been measuring in. For the recordings with the microphone at about 3 inches away from the power supply, the stock fan came in at 38.8 decibels below full scale, whereas the Noctua fan came in at 42.7 decibels below full scale, for a difference of 3.9 decibels. Then, when we moved the microphone to about 3 feet away from the power supply, the stock fan came in at 50.1 decibels below full scale, whereas the Noctua fan came in at 55.9 decibels below full scale, for a difference of 5.8 decibels. So guys, judging by the last two measurements, we can clearly see that the Noctua fan made a huge difference, especially at a little bit of a distance. Whereas with the computer actually running and everything inside of it, the other fans kind of drowned that out. While it still did quiet it down a little bit, and I can hear the difference slightly, I think the other fans are running a little bit louder, plus I got a few hard drives in there. So I'm definitely happy with the results, and I think if you have a really noisy fan or a fan that is dying, this is definitely something that's worth doing. If you already have a good power supply, it might not be as worth it, but if you are trying to just get everything as quiet as possible, it might also be worth it giving a shot. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. But please let me know what I did wrong or what I could have done better in the comments. I'm going to try to start putting out more videos, so feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.